All right. We're going to get started. My name is Kelly Bro, and this is my husband, Ryan. We're co-founders of Redbird Ministries. Missy and Shane couldn't come. They're doing Witness to Love marriage prep for her niece, and they're doing a session tonight. So we're going to get started. I just want to welcome and thank you all for joining us today for Loving Through Loss. It's our support group. It's our first meeting. And I want to first start off by saying that we are very sorry for each one of your losses. My heart truly pains for each new couple we meet that has suffered a loss of their precious child. And ministering to bereaved parents as a bereaved parent is very hard, but we accept this mission that God has laid before us very humbly, so that our yes has the ability to bring Christ to those who are suffering and in need of companionship along the journey. When we open our wounds and we reveal all of our pains, all of our sufferings, and all of our scars, time after time, God comes to us with his crucified body, resurrected, and he gives us peace. It is in his peace where our suffering is united with his, and he gives us the strength to withstand our crosses. It is with him we can endure the pain. It is with him we are able to gather and love each other through our losses. So we cling to his cross today and ask Jesus to help us to lift our cross just a little. And we're going to stand and say a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is a prayer for all who carry their cross. Oh my God, I thank you for this cross you have allowed me to carry. Please give me the strength and faith to persevere so that I might bring glory to your name while withstanding the burden of its weight. Thank you for offering me a share in your suffering. I know that you always have been, or now and ever will be, at my side each and every step of the way. Thank you also for every Simon that you have sent to me to help me bear this cross. I have prayed so often that this thorn in my flesh would be removed, but I trust that your grace is sufficient. Change my heart's troubled cry of how long, O Lord, into words of however long, O Lord. May I see only to do your will and to unite my sufferings with your passion. Help me to not get lost in my own self-concerns, but may I find in these trials a way to greater virtue, a call to prayer, and a path to trust in you alone. Permit me not to waste my pain, but to make of these struggles a sacrificial offering for others. Lord, when I am weary and I fall exhausted under the weight of this cross, please give me the courage to press on as you did. Lord Jesus, I embrace with love my cross as I share in our own, but by your grace may I carry it all the way to the vision of your glory. I abandon myself totally to your will. In Jesus Christ, I trust in you. Amen. So just a few housekeeping rules. The little bathrooms are right here. Now, I want to say there's some in the hall, but closest would be here. There's coffee in the kitchen, water in the blue ice chest, and we have snacks. In between the talk and the groups, we'll be able to go to the bathroom, but if you have to go, just feel free to go. And just a couple of things afterwards with small groups, I'm going to read in between when Adrienne and Jason talk, just so that you can know, just, like privacy. Nobody's going to, share your information. That's going to be taken off. What's said here stays here. But I'll reiterate that. So I want to call up Jason and Adrienne Mejias, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves, and their talk is about Job's faith.
Okay, so I'm Adrienne, and this is my husband, Jason. We have been married 17 years this past December. We met when we were 18, 17, on the booze cruise in Cancun. So we both grew up together. Okay, so I'm going to get into it because I didn't really kind of prepare a pre-talk. So yes, when Kelly asked us to talk for this first meeting, right away we thought about Job. Along the way throughout all of the suffering that we went through, it was constantly Job that came to our minds. So my notes are really terrible, so if you see me kind of going through it, it's because I didn't rewrite everything. Okay. But when Job's name is mentioned, the first word that comes to my mind is suffering. I know that it can be said that everyone here this evening has endured a lot of suffering. And while the main theme of the book of Job is suffering, tonight we're going to touch on the other themes that are covered in the book of Job. Some of the other themes, because there's lots of themes, but some of the other themes, which are humility, patience, and joy or reward. First, we're going to start with what is the hardest of these, suffering. In the book of Job, we learn that Job was an upright man who loved and feared God. Job's faith was tested through extreme trials that could very well lead even the most faithful to turn away from God, or at the very least question God. Job lost nearly everything he had. Hundreds of animals. He lost his servants. He lost all of his children. He had 10. And then he went through a lot of physical pain and suffering. Jason and I were married at a fairly young age. We were only 20. And we first encountered true suffering with the birth of our firstborn. Emma was born in April of 2003, and she spent only 20 short months on earth. In those 20 months, we watched as Emma suffered through countless surgeries and infections. She was moved from hospital to hospital to hospital to hospital, yet somehow she pulled through them when she shouldn't have. In the 20 months, we also faced the loss of family relationships. So many of our family, close family too, turned their backs on us. Too often I felt like we were in a tug of war with God. I felt like we were constantly fighting to keep our daughter on earth while it seemed fairly obvious that he really wanted her in heaven with him. The word roller coaster doesn't even begin to sum up the ups and downs that we encountered. There's one particular moment that really sticks out that just seemed so crazy at the time. Emma was 9 months old. She was born here in Lafayette, and we moved her to Children's Hospital just a few weeks after she was born. And then from Children's, we moved her to Tulane in New Orleans. So when she was 9 months old and she was at Tulane, my mom called to say that my dad had a massive heart attack. He was 48. And he was going to have surgery. We raced from New Orleans to Lafayette for his surgery, and then we ended up staying a few days because he was in very critical condition. Yeah. One night, because my mom stayed at the hospital constantly, and they live an hour away. They live in Gaydon. Jason and I, we would check in on Emma, and she was doing okay. So we encouraged my mom to go home to be able to get some rest. And Jason and I were going to spend the night in the hospital. So my mom finally goes home that night. We get a call from Tulane saying that Emma had coded and that they were working on saving her. So we rushed. I had to call my mom in the middle of the night and tell her to get back to Lafayette so that we can leave for New Orleans. What a long drive.
It was a very fast drive, though. Very quick.
When we got there, she was stable, and we were beyond relieved. But unfortunately, that was a pattern that we became really accustomed to with Emma. She was always on the brink of death, then somehow she would pull through. And I think we started to rely on that. Doctors would constantly tell us how bad things were, and we almost felt like, she's got this, or, God's got it.
Yeah.
I think we really started to rely on that. So like I said, she was moved to several different hospitals, including Children's, Tulane. We went all the way to Johns Hopkins. in Baltimore, back to Lafayette General where she was born, and then from Lafayette General we went back to Children's. Life for us included living in Ronald McDonald houses. When we were staying in New Orleans, when I was staying in New Orleans, Jason had to work, so he was back in Mermentau. He worked at a shipyard. And so I would stay in New Orleans at the Ronald McDonald house, and I'd go to the hospital every day. My mom would try to come a few days, but then after my dad had his heart attack, which by the way, he was fine. And so, but then when we went to Baltimore, Jason was able to find a job over there. Let me see where I was. So during those 20 months, we were actually in Baltimore at the time, we learned about our second pregnancy, which was for our second daughter, Anna. She and Emma were a year and a half apart. We were able to come back home from Baltimore because Emma was doing really well. We thought she might be coming home for the first time in her life. So Anna was born at Oshner's, and Emma was back at Children's for the second time. Anna was born at the end of October in 2004. And while she had the same genetic disorder that Emma had, hers was complicated by a heart defect as well. We did the best that we could to be with each child every day. I would travel back and forth between the two hospitals, and at night I would sleep in the waiting room at Children's. In December, we made the decision to finally get a place in New Orleans. Jason was able to find a job there so that we could finally be together every day. I needed a lot more support, and I know it really killed him to be far away and get phone calls with me in distress over what was happening in New Orleans. At that time, in December, right after we moved, Emma contracted a very serious infection, and she was not doing well. Anna, on the other hand, was stable, and doctors were planning a heart surgery. On Christmas Eve of 2004, we got a call that morning that Emma was doing very poorly. It definitely was not the first time we had heard this, but nevertheless, we rushed to the hospital. And my brother had flown in that morning to surprise me for Christmas. Jason knew about it and picked him up from the airport. I didn't even know he was coming. And right when he got in, we got the call from the hospital. That evening, Jason and I spent the last hours of Emma's life holding her and loving her. As she breathed her last breath that night, I couldn't help but wonder what the reason was that God couldn't be more generous with the time we got with her. It's something I still question. We were never able to take her out of the hospital, ever. Even, I remember just asking to take her outside at the hospital. We were never able to take her home. We were never able to have our two babies together. Like Job, I felt like we embraced all of our suffering without turning away from God. I never asked God to take away her disability. All I asked was that we could love her and care for her at home. So I felt like we weren't asking a lot. Like you gave us this cross, we're carrying it. Let us take care of her. 2 short weeks later, we lost Anna. There were complications with her heart, and she was never able to have surgery. But that time we weren't even able to be with our child when she died. She didn't get what Emma got from us during her last minutes on earth. And this was something else I didn't understand, and I was pretty angry about. Since Emma and Anna's death, Jason and I have experienced several more losses. In total, I've had 4 miscarriages. My first one came after we lost Anna. I was pregnant for our 3rd child, who once again had the same syndrome. which, by the way, we have a 75% chance of having a healthy child each pregnancy, but our first 3 fell in the 25%. However, this baby, it was another girl that we named Hannah. She had too many problems to count. I was pretty far along when I miscarried. I was 19 weeks pregnant. From what we were told by the doctor, a miscarriage, which is so devastating, would actually be a blessing. Because if Hannah would have made it to birth, we were told that she would die shortly after. And we were also told that what we would see could be pretty bad. So this brings me to the next theme, which is humility. Anytime we felt like we were in control, we were quickly reminded that we are indeed not. There are no guarantees in life. Very few of our plans have worked out the way we wanted or expected. So many times we think we're in the driver's seat when really we're only passengers. I don't know, sometimes I feel like I'm not even in the same vehicle. Throughout our experience, especially with Emma, Anna, and Hannah, I started feeling like, and wasn't good. It wasn't a good place to be in. I always felt like if I would say the right prayers, one more prayer, that somehow I would convince God to change his mind, like he was just waiting for me to do the right thing. And actually, in the book of Job, one of Job's friends questioned if the reason he was suffering was because of any sins. And I'll never forget in New Orleans, when I went to confession, one of the priests, the priest that I confessed to, asked me if there were sins that I never confessed. And he insinuated that was the reason why we were going through that.
That ran through my mind so many times. Because Adrienne's still like the perfect person.
Yeah.
She is the perfect person, and me, I am not. And I've done some stupid stuff in my lifetime. And the whole time, every time I'd be driving from Lake Charles to New Orleans, I'm thinking to myself, I did this. Like, I did this. And so I could see how, I could see that, because I put a lot of this on me, and
I think once again, though, that was our way of holding on and not letting go and letting God do his work. It was our way of feeling, I guess, in control of something. We all want to believe that we play a part in what happens next. But a lot of the times that's not true. Job said, "The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Sometimes the second part wouldn't come out of my mouth. I would feel like the Lord gave and he took away. That brings me to patience. The hardest virtue. I'd like to say that Jason and I have been patient with God, with each other, and with ourselves through our suffering. But we all have our moments. I think there are times we question, times we are angry, times we feel incredibly hopeless. But feeling these things does not mean that we don't love God or that we don't have faith in him. I think it's important to be okay with those feelings. It just means we're human. Was it the end of 2017? Yeah, we're already in 19. We were presented with the opportunity to adopt a child. So at the time, we do have 2 kids. I'll get to that, but let me just say that at that time we have 2 healthy children. That's part of the joy and reward part. So this was a child that was already adopted at age 2 and had been living with this family for 6 years. They were having a very, very difficult time with her. She was a few months younger than my son at the time. She was 8. And this fell around Christmas time. And so we truly felt like this was a blessing. We felt like this was a reward, so to speak, for all that we had gone through. This would be another child that we could add to our family because we always wanted a lot of children. And so for all that we lost, especially since we lost Emma around, on Christmas Eve, we felt like this was God's way of giving us this child. And it was a nightmare. We had this child for 6 months, and she has a lot of behavioral, emotional, mental health issues. She was born to parents on drugs, and I think we kind of thought maybe that the parents that had her, they had really young children at the time, that because we had children that were closer to her age, that it would be a different experience for her. And in those 6 months, she abused our daughter in every way possible. We saw verbal abuse, we saw physical abuse. It wasn't until she left our home that we found out that she had sexually abused her as well. And that, she just left our home last summer. That was a very, very, very hard pill to swallow because the suffering that we endured prior to that with our other children, we really didn't inflict that upon ourselves. And so there was a lot of guilt, there was a lot of anger, that we brought this child into our home thinking we were doing the right thing. So we have had a very difficult time with that. But we're very grateful that, that she has left her home. That's the only way I can say it. And she is actually getting help somewhere out of state. But like Job, God has blessed us tremendously. Job was given twice as much as he had before. Jason and I look at what we have and we recognize how blessed we are. God has granted us 2 healthy children that we love with everything. Matthew is 9 and Lily is 6. The joy we have experienced allows us to weather the storms that come. I think that without any suffering or any pain, we wouldn't recognize the joys that do come our way. It's like if we see a rainbow every day, how much are you even going to appreciate it? I think we appreciate it because of the rain and the darkness that we go through before the rainbow comes. We have no idea what's going to come next. Will we have more children? We are open to that. Will we experience the loss of another child if we do? It's a very terrifying thought for us. We just don't know. I will end with this quote from Job. Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty. For he wounds, but he binds up. He shatters, but his hands heal. I was going to say, does anybody have questions?
Yeah, you want to do questions?
Well, if anybody has questions, I don't know.
You said y'all have 2 children together now,
Yes.
and they're healthy, everything's okay with them? That's great.
So it was our number 4 and 5.
Are they girl, boy?
9, boy, and then Lily
Oh,
is 6.
six.
So yes,
Okay.
and they were praying for a baby. Yeah.
I constantly fuss at him, say, stop that. Don't do that.
Sound like a